You don't forget the sound of a man leaving you, especially when you're 8 months pregnant, especially when you can't even see your own feet anymore, and especially when the door closes softer than you expected. Because the loud ones, the shouting, the breaking dishes, the storming out, those hurt. But the quiet ones stay with you for 15 years. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Daniel asked for the divorce. Nothing dramatic, no yelling, no throwing things, just paperwork. He placed it on the kitchen table like it was a grocery list. Camille, I think this is best. Best. Have you ever noticed how people use gentle words to deliver violent blows? Best. Space. Growth. Clarity. Camille stood there with one hand pressed against her lower back because at 8 months pregnant, your spine feels like it belongs to someone else, and she just stared at the papers. "I don't understand," she said softly. And she truly didn't, because 2 nights before, she had folded his laundry. 3 nights before that, she had massaged his shoulders while he watched the game. And just that morning, she had warmed up the car so he wouldn't sit in the cold leather seats. Now here he was, asking for a divorce like she had burned the roast. Daniel didn't look cruel. That's what made it worse. He looked tired, like a man explaining math to a child. "I'm not ready to be a father," he said. "I don't think I ever was." Camille blinked. "Not ready? Sir, the baby is almost here. This isn't a restaurant order you can send back because you changed your mind." She almost laughed, but the baby shifted inside her, a slow roll beneath her ribs, and reality tightened around her chest. "I can't do this," Daniel continued. "I feel trapped." Trapped. She looked around the kitchen. The home she had helped decorate, the curtains she had sewn herself, the tiny pair of white socks folded neatly beside the crib box waiting in the living room. Trapped. She nodded slowly, not because she agreed, but because something inside her, something old, something raised to keep peace, told her not to argue. Camille had grown up in a house where women swallowed their feelings like vitamins, daily, quietly, without complaint. Her mother used to say, "Don't chase a man who's already halfway out the door." So she didn't. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She didn't even cry in front of him. She just said, "Okay." And sometimes, "okay" is the loneliest word in the English language. Daniel exhaled like he had been holding his breath for months. He reached for his car keys, paused, looked at her stomach, then looked away. "I'll send money," he said. Money. As if diapers were the only thing babies needed. As if a newborn could be rocked to sleep by a direct deposit. And just like that, he left. The door clicked shut. Not slammed, not angry, just closed. Camille stood there for a long time. Long enough for the refrigerator to hum loudly in the silence. Long enough for the baby to kick again, as if asking, "Is it just us now?" She finally lowered herself into the kitchen chair. Slowly, because 8 months pregnant is not a graceful condition. And she placed her hand over her stomach. "Well, I guess it's just you and me. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever been left at the exact moment you needed someone the most? Not when you were strong, not when you were stable, but when you were vulnerable? When your body was already stretched thin? There's a particular kind of ache that comes with abandonment during pregnancy. It's not just emotional. It feels biological, like your body expected protection and didn't receive it." The next few weeks moved like thick syrup. Daniel filed quickly. The court dates were clinical. Paperwork doesn't care about hormones. The judge didn't look at her stomach long. He signed what needed to be signed, and just like that, Camille became legally alone. But the real loneliness hadn't even started yet, because the baby wasn't born yet. And labor? Labor does not wait for emotional closure. 2 weeks later, at 2:13 in the morning, Camille's water broke, and she reached for her phone. Instinct. Not wisdom, just instinct. She stared at Daniel's name on the screen. Then she set the phone down, because some doors, once closed, don't need knocking. She drove herself to the hospital. Yes, at 8 months and 2 weeks pregnant, because what else was she going to do? Call a man who said he felt trapped? The nurse asked, "Is the father on his way?" Camille smiled. That polite, practiced smile. "No," she said, "it's just me." But it wasn't just her. Not really. Because God has a way of witnessing what men walk away from. And that night, in a delivery room filled with fluorescent light and quiet courage, Camille gave birth to a baby boy. She named him Isaiah. And as she held him for the first time, she made a decision. She would never speak badly about his father. She would never poison his heart. She would simply raise him. In silence. What she didn't know, what she could possibly know, was that 15 years later, that same silence would echo back to Daniel in a way he never saw coming. And when he finally knocked on her door, it wouldn't be the reunion he imagined. But we'll get there. Because first, you need to understand what those 15 years did to Camille and what they did to him. The first year after Isaiah was born felt like living underwater. Everything was muffled. Camille moved through her days in slow motion, feeding, burping, rocking, washing bottles at 3 a.m. while the rest of the world slept like nothing had happened. Because that's the thing about heartbreak. The sun still rises, the mail still comes, and the electric bill still expects to be paid. Daniel did send money. Not much, but enough to say, "See, I'm not a bad man." And isn't that interesting? Some people think financial support is the same as fatherhood. It's not. Money can buy formula. It cannot teach a boy how to shake a man's hand. It cannot show up at kindergarten orientation. It cannot kiss scraped knees. But Camille never complained. Not publicly, not to friends, not to church members who whispered, "Didn't her husband leave?" She would just smile and say, "We're doing fine." Now, let me pause right here, because if you're watching this and you've ever said, "We're fine," when you absolutely were not fine, you know what I mean. Sometimes fine means, "I cried in the shower so my child wouldn't hear me." Sometimes fine means, "I skipped dinner so he could have seconds." Sometimes fine means, "I'm tired, but I refuse to let my son see it." Isaiah grew fast. He had Camille's eyes, steady and observant, and Daniel's height. By age 3, he was already taller than most boys in his daycare class. People would say, "Where does he get that from?" Camille would just shrug. "He comes from strong stock," she'd say. Strong stock. Notice what she didn't say. She didn't erase Daniel. She just refused to weaponize him. That was her quiet rebellion. Meanwhile, Daniel moved on. Of course he did. Men who say they feel trapped rarely sit alone for long. Within a year, he was dating a woman named Brianna. She was younger, child-free, carefree, the kind of woman who still believed love was effortless. Daniel liked that about her. With Brianna, he didn't have to think about diapers or court documents or the son whose birth he had missed. He could pretend the past was a closed chapter. And for a while, it worked. They traveled, posted smiling photos, started over. But here's the truth nobody tells you. You can leave a woman. You cannot leave your choices. They follow you quietly. Daniel would occasionally scroll through Camille's social media. She didn't post much, just a picture of Isaiah on his first birthday, another on his first day of preschool. Daniel stared at those pictures longer than he wanted to admit. He never liked them, he never commented, but he looked. And sometimes at night, when Brianna was asleep beside him, he would think, He looks like me. Then he would roll over and silence the thought, because guilt is inconvenient and convenience is powerful. Back in Camille's world, year 3 brought something unexpected. Isaiah asked his first question. "Where's my daddy?" He was sitting cross-legged on the living room rug, playing with plastic dinosaurs. Camille froze. There it was, the moment she knew would come. She walked over, sat down beside him, and smoothed his hair. "Your daddy lives somewhere else," she said gently. "Why?" Now that question, that one is sharper. Camille swallowed. "Sometimes grown-ups don't stay together," she said carefully. "But that doesn't mean they don't care." Was that entirely true? She wasn't sure. But she refused to let bitterness shape her son's understanding of love. Because children build their identity from the stories we tell them, and she would not let Isaiah grow up thinking he was unwanted. She repeated the same message through the years. He loves you in his own way. Even when she wasn't sure what that way was, even when Daniel missed scheduled visits. Yes, visits were arranged, court-ordered, twice a month. At first, Daniel showed up, awkward, stiff, like a distant uncle trying too hard. He brought toys, expensive ones, because, again, money feels easier than presents. But toddlers don't care about price tags. They care about consistency. By year 4, the visits became irregular. Work conflicts, travel, emergencies. Isaiah would sit by the window sometimes, waiting. Camille never criticized Daniel in those moments. She would just say, maybe something came up. But when Isaiah would quietly put his shoes back in the closet, that silence, it was heavier than anger. And let me ask you something. What hurts more? A father who yells or a father who simply doesn't come? Think about that. By year 5, Daniel had married Brianna. Camille found out through a mutual friend. She felt something. Not jealousy, not even anger, just a strange, hollow space. Like realizing a chapter of your life has officially been archived. Isaiah was 5 years old when he stopped asking about missed visits. Children adapt faster than we think. Sometimes too fast. He focused on school, on basketball, on being the man of the house, as older church ladies would teasingly say. Camille shaded when they said that. He was just a boy. He deserved to be a boy. But circumstances have a way of maturing children early. And Daniel? Well, Daniel began noticing something he hadn't expected. His marriage wasn't as effortless as he thought. Brianna eventually wanted a child. Daniel hesitated. That word again. Trapped. The conversation repeated itself. Different woman, same fear. And one night, during an argument about starting a family, Brianna said something that hit deeper than she intended. "You already have a son, Daniel. You just don't act like it." The room went quiet. Because sometimes the truth doesn't need to shout. It just stands there. Daniel didn't respond, but that sentence stayed with him. He poured himself a drink that night, scrolled through old photos again, and for the first time, he didn't look away quickly. 15 years feels long when you're waiting, but it feels short when you realize what you've missed. And Daniel was starting to feel something unfamiliar. Not regret, not yet, but awareness. And awareness is the seed of regret. Meanwhile, back at Camille's house, Isaiah brought home a school project. Family tree. He sat at the kitchen table, the same kitchen where Daniel once laid down divorce papers, and carefully wrote his name at the bottom. Camille watched quietly. He wrote "Mom" above him. Then he paused, stared at the blank space beside it. "Can I just leave it empty?" he asked softly. Camille felt her throat tighten. And in that moment, she realized silence had protected him, but it had also left questions unanswered. She reached across the table. "Write his name," she said gently, and Isaiah did. But what happened next, that's when things began to shift. Because sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes it waits. Years 6 through 10 didn't explode. They stretched. Slow, steady, quiet. Which is how most life-changing seasons happen, not with fireworks, but with small shifts you don't notice until you look back. Isaiah turned 6 with a gap-toothed smile and a serious way of observing the world. He wasn't loud like some boys. He watched first, spoke second. Camille used to joke, "You got that from me." But deep down, she knew he also got something else from Daniel. The silence. Not the peaceful kind, the protective kind. By second grade, Isaiah had learned how to read people before he read books. If someone hesitated when talking about fathers, he changed the subject. If a classmate bragged about, "My dad did this," or "My dad took me there," Isaiah would nod politely, then go quiet. Now, here's something people don't talk about enough. Children don't always cry when they hurt. Sometimes they just adjust. And adjustment can look a lot like strength until it doesn't. One afternoon, when Isaiah was 7, he came home with a black eye. Camille's heart nearly stopped. What happened? He shrugged. Nothing. Nothing. There it is again, that family inheritance of swallowing pain. After gentle questioning, she learned a boy at school had said, "At least I have a dad." Isaiah swung first and lost. Camille didn't scold him immediately. She sat beside him on the couch, held an ice pack to his cheek, and asked softly, "Does it bother you when kids say things like that?" He stared straight ahead. "A little," he admitted. "Why didn't you tell me?" He shrugged again. "I didn't want you to feel bad." Let that sit for a second. 7 years old, already protecting his mother. Camille smiled gently, but that night, after he went to bed, she cried into a dish towel in the kitchen. Because silence protects dignity, but it also isolates. Meanwhile, Daniel's life was unraveling in ways he hadn't predicted. Brianna did get pregnant, and for a moment Daniel felt something like redemption. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time he'd be ready. But fear doesn't disappear just because circumstances change. It waits. And when Brianna began talking about nursery paint colors and pediatricians, Daniel felt the walls inch closer. Again. One night, during an argument, Brianna said something that froze him in place. "You walked away once. I won't let you do it twice." That word, twice, as if fatherhood was a test he had already failed. And maybe it was. Daniel stayed this time. Physically. But emotionally, he drifted. He worked late, stayed distracted, missed appointments. It wasn't abandonment, not technically, but emotional absence has a way of feeling the same. Their daughter, Ava, was born healthy, beautiful, tiny. Daniel held her, and for a brief, flickering moment, he felt the weight of what he had missed 15 years earlier. The hospital room, the newborn cry, the trembling hands. He had robbed himself of that with Isaiah, and now the comparison whispered. But instead of leaning into that discomfort, he buried it, because facing regret requires humility, and humility can bruise the ego. Back in Camille's world, Isaiah turned 9 and discovered basketball. Now this boy, quiet, thoughtful, steady, transformed on the court. He moved with confidence, with intensity, with something that looked almost like release. Camille sat in the bleachers at every game, every single one, even when she had to leave work early, even when her feet ached, even when she was the only parent cheering alone. And one Saturday afternoon, after Isaiah scored the winning shot, a coach approached her. "Ma'am, that boy's got discipline. Who trains him?" Camille smiled. "Life," she said softly. Now here's where the shift begins. Daniel happened to see a short video clip of that game. Not because Camille sent it, she never did, but because someone tagged Isaiah's name on a local sports page. Daniel watched the clip 3 times. His son, taller now, stronger, moving like confidence, wrapped in restraint. And the comments underneath? Future star. Kid's got heart. Who's his father? Daniel's chest tightened. That question again. Who's his father? Technically, him. Practically, absent. He clicked onto Camille's profile, scrolled, saw pictures of Isaiah holding trophies, report cards, honor roll certificates, and for the first time, something sharper than awareness cut through him. He had missed the building years, not the easy baby years, the shaping years. Years 6 through 10 are when boys decide who they are, and Daniel had not been there to influence that decision. That realization didn't arrive loudly. It slipped in during quiet moments, like when Ava, his daughter, asked, "Do I have a big brother?" Children have a way of asking questions adults avoid. Daniel hesitated. "Yes," he said finally. "Where is he?" Somewhere between pride and shame, Daniel answered, "He lives with his mom." Ava tilted her head. "Why doesn't he come here?" "Because I didn't go there." But Daniel didn't say that. He said, "It's complicated." Isn't that the adult favorite? Complicated, which usually means, I made choices I don't want to unpack. Years 9 and 10 brought something else Daniel didn't expect. Distance from Brianna, not explosive fights, just coldness, polite conversations, two people realizing love doesn't erase character flaws. And one night, after another quiet dinner filled with unspoken tension, Brianna looked at him and said, "Do you ever think about him?" Daniel didn't pretend not to know who she meant. "Yes," he admitted. "Why don't you go see him?" That question hovered in the air. Why don't you go see him? Because showing up late feels embarrassing, because facing Camille feels uncomfortable, because Isaiah might not need him anymore. And that possibility, that's the one that terrified him most. Meanwhile, Isaiah turned 10 and brought home another project, this one titled My Hero. Camille assumed he'd write about an athlete, maybe his coach, maybe a celebrity. Instead, he handed her the paper quietly. At the top, in careful handwriting, it read, My Mom. Camille read it slowly. She works hard. She doesn't complain. She comes to every game. She tells me the truth, but doesn't talk bad about people. She says real strength is quiet. Camille's hands trembled because she realized something profound. Her silence had not weakened her son. It had shaped him. But silence, like any tool, cuts both ways. And somewhere else in town, Daniel was staring at his phone, at that same hero essay someone had posted proudly online. And that's when regret finally took root. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet, persistent ache. And regret, once planted, doesn't stay small. It grows, especially when 15 years are ticking closer. What Daniel didn't know was that the next 5 years would strip him of every distraction he used to avoid accountability. And when life finally cornered him, there would be only one door left to knock on. By the time Isaiah turned 11, Camille no longer flinched at father-related questions. Not because they stopped coming, but because she had learned how to answer them without bleeding. That's a skill, by the way, answering without bleeding. It takes practice, it takes swallowing pride, and it takes choosing your child's peace over your own vindication. Isaiah was taller now, nearly eye level with her. His voice had started to deepen, cracking at inconvenient moments, like it couldn't decide whether to stay a boy or become a man. Middle school arrived, with lockers, hormones, and sharper social hierarchies. And somewhere in that chaos, Isaiah developed something Camille hadn't anticipated: anger. Not loud anger, controlled anger. The kind that simmers, the kind that shows up in clenched fists and intense focus. His basketball coach noticed it first. After one aggressive foul during a game, Coach Ramirez pulled him aside. "Son," he said gently, "you're playing like you're trying to prove something." Isaiah didn't respond, because he was. Every shot was a statement, every rebound a declaration, every win a silent message to a man who wasn't there. "Look at me." Meanwhile, Daniel's carefully constructed life began cracking. Brianna filed for separation in year 12. No screaming, no dramatic betrayal, just exhaustion. "I feel alone even when you're here," she told him. And that sentence hit differently than the ones before, because this time he couldn't blame fear, or youth, or timing. This time the common denominator was him. Have you ever looked around and realized the pattern isn't the people you choose, it's you? That's a humbling mirror. Daniel moved into a small townhouse across town, half the size of his old home, twice as quiet. He had Ava on weekends, and even in those moments, joy felt threaded with something unresolved. One Saturday, Ava found an old photo tucked inside a book. A younger Daniel, standing beside Camille, her hand resting on her pregnant stomach. Ava studied it. Is this when she was carrying him? Daniel nodded slowly. "Why aren't you in any of his other pictures?" Children don't mean to be precise. They just are. Daniel swallowed. "I wasn't around much." Ava tilted her head. "Did you not want to be?" And there it was, the question he had avoided for 13 years. Did you not want to be? He opened his mouth, closed it, then said something he had never said aloud. "I was scared." Ava considered that, then shrugged. "But you're not scared of me?" No, he wasn't. And that realization cracked something open. Fear hadn't been about fatherhood. It had been about responsibility, about permanence, about not being able to walk away without consequence. But here's the truth about walking away. The consequence always comes. It just takes its time. Back in Camille's world, year 12 brought something unexpected. Isaiah got into a fight, a real one, not playground teasing, not a shove, a punch that sent another boy to the nurse's office. The school called Camille in. She sat in that small administrative chair, hands folded calmly in her lap, while the principal explained the situation. "He's a good kid, but he carries something." Camille knew what that something was. That evening, she knocked on Isaiah's bedroom door. He was sitting on his bed, jaw tight. "You want to tell me what happened?" she asked softly. "He said I act like I don't need a dad because mine didn't want me," Isaiah replied flatly. The words sliced clean. Camille sat beside him. "Do you believe that?" she asked. Isaiah's silence stretched. Then he whispered, "I don't know." And that answer hurt more than anger ever could, because doubt is quieter, more dangerous. Camille took his hands. "Your father's choices were about him," she said carefully, "not you." That's a sentence many adults still need to hear. Your father's choices were about him, not you. Isaiah nodded slowly, but doubt doesn't disappear overnight. It lingers, just like regret. Around year 13, Daniel's health took an unexpected turn. Nothing dramatic at first. Fatigue, headaches, ignoring doctor's appointments. Because men often treat their bodies the way they treat emotions, delay and dismiss. Until one afternoon at work, Daniel collapsed. Stress-induced hypertension, the doctor said. High blood pressure. Your body is carrying something it can't manage anymore, the physician explained. Interesting choice of words. Carrying something. Daniel lay in that hospital bed, staring at fluorescent lights, and for the first time since Isaiah's birth, he thought about that delivery room, the one he had avoided. He imagined Camille alone, scared, carrying something she couldn't manage either. But she didn't collapse. She endured. And that comparison humbled him. Pain has a way of slowing you down long enough to think, and thinking, when you've avoided it for years, can be overwhelming. Daniel began attending therapy, at first reluctantly, then honestly. And in one session, the therapist asked a simple question. If your son described you today, what would he say? Daniel didn't answer immediately because he didn't know. And not knowing who you are in your child's story, that's devastating. Meanwhile, Isaiah turned 13 and hit 6 feet tall, a presence, a quiet force. College scouts started noticing him at regional tournaments. Camille remained steady, present, supportive, never once mentioning Daniel's absence as motivation. She refused to let resentment raise her son. But sometimes, late at night, she wondered, will he ever come back? And if he does, what will he expect? Because time doesn't pause, and forgiveness doesn't automatically regenerate. Back in therapy, Daniel said something that shifted everything. I think I owe him an apology. The therapist leaned forward. What's stopping you? Daniel hesitated. What if he doesn't want to hear it? Ah, there it is. Fear again. But this time, not fear of responsibility, fear of rejection. The same rejection he had unknowingly planted. Life has a way of circling back, and Daniel could feel the circle closing. What he didn't know was that year 14 would bring a moment that would force his hand, a moment that would leave him standing outside a door he hadn't approached in 15 years. And when that moment came, he would finally understand what it means to knock. By the time Isaiah turned 14, the house felt different. Not quieter, stronger. There's a difference. Silence used to live there because something was missing. Now it lived there because something had been built. Routine, trust, rhythm. Isaiah woke up at 5:30 every morning before school to run drills in the driveway. Dribble, pivot, shoot. Dribble, pivot, shoot. The sound of the basketball hitting pavement became the soundtrack of Camille's mornings. Thump, thump, thump. Consistency. You see, when a child grows up without one form of stability, they often create it somewhere else. For Isaiah, it was discipline. For Camille, it was faith. She never forced religion down his throat, but she did pray quietly. Not for Daniel to return, not even for justice. She prayed for her son's heart to stay soft, because success hardens some people, and abandonment hardens others. She wanted neither for him. Now, let's pause for a moment. If you've ever raised a child alone, you know something. You're not just parenting, you're buffering. Buffering disappointment, buffering absence, buffering questions that have no clean answers. And Camille had been buffering for 14 years. Meanwhile, Daniel's life had narrowed. The townhouse felt smaller, his social circle shrank. Ava still visited, but even she was growing independent. Teenagers don't need you the same way. And Daniel began noticing something unsettling. When Ava talked about school events, she mentioned her stepdad more often than him. He helped me with my science project. He came to my recital. He picked me up. Daniel smiled through it, but the mirror kept reflecting the same truth. Presence matters. One evening, while sorting through old paperwork, Daniel found something tucked inside a folder, a copy of the divorce decree. The date stared back at him. 15 years approaching. 15 years since he placed papers on a kitchen table and called it best. He sat there a long time, and for the first time, he didn't justify it. He didn't blame timing, or youth, or fear. He simply admitted, I hurt them. Not accidentally, but by choice. That's a heavy realization. Now here's where everything shifts. Isaiah received a letter, a thick envelope with a university seal. Camille stood in the kitchen, yes, that same kitchen, as Isaiah opened it carefully. His hands were steady. His eyes weren't. He read silently at first, then looked up. Mom, she froze. What? I got it. Full athletic scholarship, out of state, prestigious, earned, not handed. Camille covered her mouth, because sometimes joy hits harder than grief. She hugged him tightly, and in that embrace lived 14 years of early mornings, quiet sacrifices, unspoken prayers. Isaiah had done it. And here's the thing. News travels, especially when it's good. A mutual acquaintance posted the announcement online. Local teen earns full scholarship, with a photo of Isaiah holding his acceptance letter. Daniel saw it within minutes. His heart pounded as he stared at the screen. His son, a man now, strong, accomplished, on his way somewhere without him. That realization didn't whisper. It roared. 15 years, and the milestones had stacked up without his fingerprints. Daniel stood abruptly, paced, sat back down, picked up the phone, put it down. What do you say after 15 years? Congratulations? Sorry? Remember me? Before he could decide, life interrupted. 3 days later, Daniel received a call. His father had passed away. Sudden heart failure. Now, grief has a way of stripping you bare. Funerals are not just about loss, they're about reflection. Daniel stood beside his father's casket days later, listening as relatives shared stories. Your dad never missed a game, one uncle said. He worked 2 jobs but still showed up, another added. Showed up. That phrase echoed painfully, because Daniel knew the comparison forming in his own mind. He had not shown up, not when it mattered most. As the service ended, Daniel found himself staring at a photo board filled with images of his father through the years. Young, middle-aged, older, present. And he wondered, when I'm gone, what will Isaiah say about me? Will there even be stories, or just silence? That thought unsettled him deeply. After the funeral, Daniel drove home alone. No music, no distractions, just the weight of realization pressing against his chest. He pulled into his driveway but didn't get out. Instead, he opened his phone again, scrolled to the scholarship announcement, zoomed in on Isaiah's face. 15 years old, confident, eyes steady. Camille stood beside him in the photo, proud, radiant, strong. Daniel whispered something he had avoided saying for a decade and a half. I was wrong. Not to a therapist, not to a friend, but to himself. And that matters, because change doesn't start with action, it starts with honesty. Now here's the moment, the one that separates regret from redemption. Daniel opened his contacts, scrolled to a number he hadn't dialed in years. Camille. He didn't call, not yet. Instead, he searched her address. The same house. She had never moved. Something about that steadiness humbled him. He grabbed his keys. And here's where I want you to lean in, because sometimes life gives you a crossroads. You can stay comfortable in your guilt, or you can risk being rejected in pursuit of reconciliation. Daniel chose the risk. He drove across town. Every red light felt longer, every turn heavier. He parked down the street first, sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel. 15 years condensed into one moment. Now let me ask you something. If you had walked away from your child, if you had missed birthdays, games, heartbreaks, if you had convinced yourself it was best, would you knock? Or would pride keep you parked? Daniel stepped out of the car. The air felt different on that street. Familiar, unforgiving. He walked slowly toward the front door. The porch light was on. Inside, through the window, he could see movement, laughter, Isaiah's voice, deeper now, a man's voice. Daniel's heart pounded harder than it had in the hospital months earlier. This wasn't hypertension. This was accountability. He reached the door, paused, raised his hand, and for a brief second, fear tried to reclaim him. But this time, he didn't let it win. He knocked. 3 firm, unmistakable knocks. Inside, the laughter stopped. Footsteps approached. And when the door opened, 15 years stood face to face. When the door opened, time did something strange. It didn't rewind. It didn't soften. It just stood still. Camille was the one holding the door. Of course she was. She always answered things directly. For a split second, her eyes didn't recognize him. 15 years adds lines to a face. Humility bends posture. Regret settles in the eyes. Then recognition arrived. Not dramatic, not gasping, just steady. Daniel. She didn't say it like a question. She said it like a fact. He swallowed. Hi, Camille. And there it was, the first exchange in 15 years. 2 syllables each, neither prepared for the weight of them. Now, here's something powerful. Camille didn't slam the door. She didn't gasp. She didn't step back in shock. She just looked at him, long enough to measure who he had become. And Daniel felt it, that quiet evaluation, because silence, when mastered, can be stronger than shouting. Before either of them could say another word, a voice came from behind her. Mom, who is it? Isaiah stepped into view. 6'2" now, broad shoulders, calm stance. His presence filled the doorway before Daniel even processed it. For a second, Daniel forgot how to breathe, because it's one thing to see photos. It's another to see the life you missed standing 3 feet away. Isaiah looked at him. Really looked. Not confused, not angry, just assessing. Camille didn't rush to explain. She stepped slightly to the side. This is your father, she said evenly. No venom, no softness, just truth. Isaiah's expression didn't change much. He nodded once. Okay. Okay. Funny how that word keeps showing up in this story. 15 years ago, Camille said it when her world split in half. Now her son says it when the past reappears. Daniel opened his mouth, closed it, then finally said, "Congratulations on the scholarship." It sounded small, too small. Isaiah gave a polite nod. Thank you. There was no hostility, but there was distance. Measured, controlled, the kind of distance built brick by brick over birthdays and missed visits. Camille crossed her arms lightly. Not defensive, just grounded. "Why are you here, Daniel?" Direct. He respected that about her once. He respected it even more now. He began, and his voice faltered slightly. "I came to say I'm sorry." Now listen closely. Apologies sound different depending on who's saying them. Some are rushed, some are rehearsed. This one wasn't polished. It trembled. Isaiah's jaw tightened slightly. "For what?" he asked calmly. That question landed heavier than anything else so far. For what? Because when you've been absent long enough, the list gets long. Daniel exhaled slowly. "For not being there, for leaving, for choosing fear over responsibility, for missing everything." Silence filled the porch, but this wasn't the old silence. This one wasn't swallowing pain. It was evaluating sincerity. Camille watched Isaiah carefully. This was his moment, not hers. 15 years ago, she absorbed the impact alone. Now, the impact belonged to him. Isaiah studied Daniel's face. "You missed a lot," he said quietly. It wasn't accusation, it was fact. Daniel nodded. "I know." And here's the shift. Instead of defending himself, he didn't. No excuses, no explanations about youth or confusion, just acknowledgement. "I was wrong," he said. Camille felt something unfamiliar move through her chest. Not forgiveness, not anger. Release. Because accountability, when genuine, lifts something off everyone involved. Isaiah stepped forward slightly, close enough now that Daniel could see the faint scar above his eyebrow, probably from basketball, probably from growing up without him. "What do you want?" Isaiah asked. Now that question separates regret from intention. Daniel hesitated, but not from fear this time, from honesty. "I don't expect anything," he said. "I just didn't want you to leave for college without hearing that I was proud of you and that I'm sorry." There it was. No demands, no emotional pressure, just ownership. Now let me ask you something. If someone hurt you deeply and came back years later without excuses, would that change anything? Or does time make some doors permanently closed? Isaiah looked back at Camille briefly, not for permission, just instinct. She gave a small nod, not telling him what to feel, just telling him he was safe to feel it. Isaiah turned back to Daniel. "I don't hate you," he said carefully, and that sentence surprised all of them, because hatred requires energy, and Isaiah had invested his energy elsewhere. "But I don't know you," he added. That part hurt. Daniel nodded slowly. "I understand." Another quiet truth. The porch light buzzed faintly above them. A car passed down the street. Normal life continuing while something significant unfolded. Camille finally spoke again. "It's late," she said gently. "Isaiah has early practice." It wasn't dismissal. It was boundary. Daniel respected it. He stepped back slightly. "I won't keep you." He looked at Isaiah one more time. "I'm proud of the man you've become." And for the first time since he arrived, Isaiah's composure flickered, just slightly. Because every son, no matter how strong, wonders what his father sees when he looks at him. "Thank you," Isaiah said quietly. Daniel nodded once, then turned, walked back down the steps, each step lighter and heavier at the same time. He didn't ask to come in. He didn't ask for a second chance. He simply showed up. Late, but present. As he reached his car, he paused and glanced back. The door was still open. Camille and Isaiah standing side by side, not fractured, not fragile, strong. And Daniel realized something profound in that moment. They hadn't been waiting for him. They had been building without him. That realization stung, but it also clarified something. Reconciliation isn't about reclaiming a role. It's about earning proximity. Inside the house, Camille closed the door gently. Isaiah stood still for a moment. "You okay?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Yeah." But he didn't move. He was thinking, processing. 15 years condensed into 10 minutes on a porch. That's a lot for anyone, especially a 15-year-old boy trying to become a man. Finally, he looked at her. "Did you ever think he'd come back?" Camille considered the question carefully. "I stopped expecting it," she said honestly, "but I never closed the door." And that right there, that's strength. Not naivety, not longing, just openness without dependency. Isaiah nodded slowly. "Do you think he means it?" Camille met his eyes. "I think he finally understands. And sometimes, understanding is the beginning of change. But this story isn't over, because knocking once doesn't rebuild 15 years, and showing up late doesn't automatically grant access. The real question becomes, what happens next? Does Daniel step back into silence? Or does he learn how to show up consistently this time? And more importantly, does Isaiah let him? The morning after the knock felt ordinary, and that's what made it strange. The sun rose, coffee brewed, the basketball thumped against the driveway at 5:30 a.m. Life hadn't dramatically shifted overnight, because real change rarely does. It reveals itself in what happens next. Isaiah didn't mention the porch conversation at breakfast. He ate his eggs, scrolled his phone, talked about practice. But Camille noticed something subtle. He checked his phone twice. Not obsessively, just curiously. Meanwhile, Daniel barely slept. He replayed the porch moment over and over. Every word, every pause, every flicker in Isaiah's expression. Regret had brought him to the door, but consistency would determine what happened next. Now let me ask you something. It's one thing to apologize once, but can you show up again and again and again? That's where most people fail, because redemption is repetitive. At 10:17 a.m., Daniel stared at his phone. He had saved Isaiah's number months ago, never used it. His thumb hovered, then he typed, "Good luck at practice today. Proud of you." Simple. No pressure. He stared at the message for a full minute before hitting send. The bubble disappeared. Delivered. Now, the waiting began. If you've ever tried to rebuild something fragile, you know this feeling. Every minute stretches. 23 minutes later, a response appeared. "Thanks." One word, but it wasn't rejection. It wasn't silence. It was a crack in the wall. Daniel exhaled slowly. That evening, Camille sat in the bleachers as usual. Same seat, third row from the top, left side of the court. Habit creates comfort. The gym buzzed with parents and chatter. Isaiah warmed up on the floor below. Focused, locked in. Camille didn't see Isaiah at first. He arrived quietly, stood near the back wall, hands in his pockets, unsure where he belonged. Now here's the test. Showing up once at a front door is brave. Showing up in a room where everyone else has been consistent for years, that's humbling. He spotted Camille eventually. Their eyes met briefly. No hostility, no invitation, just awareness. She gave a small nod. Not approval, not encouragement, just acknowledgement. Daniel stayed standing. He didn't try to sit beside her. He didn't try to explain himself to anyone. He just watched. And when Isaiah stepped onto the court, Daniel felt something shift inside him. Pride. Raw. unfiltered. Isaiah played harder that night, more focused, more composed, and midway through the second quarter, he glanced toward the stands. Just once. He spotted Camille immediately. Then his eyes scanned further back, and there he was. Daniel. Not hiding, not waving, just present. Isaiah's expression didn't change dramatically, but something steadied in his shoulders. He sank the next shot clean. Swish. Now pause for a moment. Children don't always admit they're looking for you, but they notice when you're there. The game ended with a win. Parents gathered near the exit, laughter, congratulations, noise. Daniel hesitated near the back, unsure if he should approach. Isaiah solved that question for him. He walked over, sweaty, breathing heavy, calm. "You came," Isaiah said. It wasn't accusation. It wasn't surprise. Just acknowledgement. "Yeah," Daniel replied quietly. Isaiah nodded once. "Thanks." Again, simple, but meaningful. Daniel didn't overstep. "I'll try to make the next one too," he said. Try. That word carries weight. Camille approached then, her expression measured, but softer than it had been on the porch. "Game's Thursday," she said calmly. "Information, not invitation." Daniel nodded. "I'll be there." And that's when the real work began. Not dramatic speeches, not emotional breakdowns, just presence. Thursday came. Daniel showed up. So did Camille. Same seats, different distance. Week after week, Daniel attended. He texted occasionally. Nothing overwhelming, just steady. "Great game. Good luck on your test. Let me know if you need anything." Isaiah's responses slowly expanded from "thanks" to "appreciate it" to actual sentences. One afternoon, Isaiah surprised them both. "Can we get food after practice?" he asked. Daniel blinked. "Just us." There it was, the first opening. They went to a small diner across town, neutral ground, booths worn from years of conversations. Isaiah ordered a burger. Daniel ordered coffee he barely drank. Silence filled the first few minutes. Not awkward, just cautious. Finally, Isaiah spoke. "Why did you really leave?" Direct, just like his mother. Daniel didn't rush the answer. "Because I was scared," he said honestly. "I thought I wasn't ready. I thought leaving would make things easier." Isaiah studied him. Did it? That question carried 15 years of weight. Daniel shook his head slowly. No. They sat with that. Truth, once spoken, clears space. Not all at once, but enough to breathe. "I used to think it was me," Isaiah admitted quietly. Daniel's chest tightened. "It wasn't," he said firmly. "It was me." And sometimes children need to hear that clearly. No ambiguity, no shared blame. Ownership. Isaiah nodded. He didn't forgive him right there. He didn't hug him, but something shifted. Respect, maybe, or the beginning of it. Back at home that night, Camille listened as Isaiah recounted the diner conversation. She didn't pry, didn't guide, just listened. "How do you feel?" she asked softly. Isaiah shrugged. "Different." Different can mean many things. Hopeful, guarded, curious. Camille smiled gently. "Take your time," she said. "You don't owe anyone fast feelings." And that right there, that's wisdom. Daniel continued showing up. Not perfectly, but consistently. One game turned into 5. 5 turned into a season. He didn't miss another. Word spread quietly among parents. "Oh, that's his dad." Not said with judgment, just observation. Daniel didn't seek validation. He knew attendance now didn't erase absence then, but it mattered because consistency rebuilds what apologies can't. Now here's where it gets interesting. College move-in day approached. Boxes packed, suitcases zipped. The house that once felt built from survival now hummed with transition. And Daniel faced a new question. Would he be invited, or would he watch from a distance again? Because showing up at games is one thing, showing up at milestones is another. The morning of departure arrived. Car loaded, energy high, but heavy. Isaiah stepped outside to grab the last bag. Daniel's car pulled up behind Camille's. He stepped out slowly, not assuming, just present. Isaiah looked at him, then at Camille, then back at him. "You coming?" Isaiah asked. And that single question, it closed a 15-year gap in a way no apology could. Daniel nodded quietly. Yeah. And for the first time, he didn't feel like an outsider standing on a porch. He felt like a father earning his place, one consistent step at a time. But the real test of regret isn't whether you show up once reconciliation begins. It's whether you remain when life becomes inconvenient again. Because growth doesn't erase history, it transforms it. And 15 years later, the knock on the door had turned into something neither of them expected. Not restoration of the past, but construction of something new. College move-in day felt like controlled chaos. Cars lined the campus roads, parents carrying mini refrigerators like trophies of survival, young adults pretending they weren't nervous. Isaiah stood between Camille and Daniel on the sidewalk outside his dorm. Tall, steady, ready. But if you looked closely, really closely, you could see the weight of transition sitting behind his eyes. Camille adjusted his collar unnecessarily. Mothers do that. We fix what doesn't need fixing when we're trying not to cry. Daniel stood slightly back, hands in his pockets at first, still learning where to place himself in these shared moments. Boxes were carried upstairs, bedding unpacked, roommate introductions exchanged, small talk about majors and practice schedules, ordinary things. But underneath it all lived something extraordinary. 15 years ago, this boy's father had walked away. Today, he was helping him hang jerseys on a dorm wall. Life has a way of circling back. Not to shame you, but to show you who you could have been all along. When everything was finally arranged, Isaiah stepped back. "This is it," he said softly. That sentence lands differently when your child leaves home. Camille felt her throat tighten. Daniel swallowed hard. Isaiah looked at both of them. "Thank you," he said simply. "Not just for the scholarship, not just for being there that day, but for something deeper. For showing up, eventually." They hugged him one at a time. Camille first. Long, familiar, grounded. Then Daniel. Shorter. New, but real. And in that hug, Daniel understood something he hadn't grasped at 28. Fatherhood isn't about perfection. It's about presence, even if you start late. Isaiah pulled back and gave a half smile. "Don't be strangers," he said. Funny thing to say, but meaningful. Camille nodded. "We won't." Daniel didn't trust his voice, so he just squeezed Isaiah's shoulder. As they walked back to the car, silence filled the space between Camille and Daniel. Not awkward, reflective. The campus shrank in the rearview mirror, and somewhere between the exit ramp and the highway, Daniel spoke. "You did an incredible job," he said quietly. Camille kept her eyes on the road. "I did what I had to." He nodded. "I know." A pause. Then something heavier. "I'm sorry for what I put you through." Now here's the difference between apology on a porch and apology on a highway 15 years later. The first one seeks relief. The second one understands impact. Camille inhaled slowly. "I forgave you a long time ago," she said. Daniel turned slightly toward her. "You did?" She nodded once. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean trusting right away. That's wisdom earned the hard way. He absorbed that. I don't expect to undo the past, he said. I just don't want to repeat it. Camille finally glanced at him, and for the first time in years, she didn't see the man who left. She saw the man who learned. There's a difference. Growth doesn't erase damage, but it acknowledges it. You're different, she said quietly. Daniel exhaled. Pain will do that. They both understood what kind of pain he meant, not the kind that comes from being left, the kind that comes from realizing you did the leaving. They drove in thoughtful silence for several miles. Then Camille asked something unexpected. Why now? Daniel stared at the road ahead. My dad's funeral, he admitted. Hearing people talk about how he showed up, I realized I didn't want my story to end like that. Camille nodded slowly. Regret has a way of clarifying legacy. I'm glad you knocked, she said simply. That sentence carried more grace than he deserved, but grace doesn't measure worth. It offers opportunity. When they reached Camille's neighborhood, Daniel hesitated before stepping out of the car. I know I can't rewrite 15 years. No, she agreed calmly, but you can write the next 15. That right there is the lesson. Late regret is heavy. It steals sleep. It replays memories you wish you'd handled differently. But it also teaches. And if you let it, it reshapes you. Daniel didn't become a perfect father overnight. He still had moments of insecurity, still wondered if Isaiah truly trusted him, still felt the sting of missed birthdays and empty chairs at school plays. But he kept showing up. Phone calls turned into weekend visits turned into shared traditions, basketball games at the college level, holiday dinners, real conversations, not forced, not rushed. Built, slowly. And here's something beautiful. Isaiah never asked Daniel to make up for the past. He asked him to be consistent in the present. That's all most people really want. Not grand gestures, not dramatic apologies, just steady presence. Camille watched it all unfold quietly. She didn't interfere, didn't coach, didn't control. She understood something many people struggle with. You can't protect your child from every hurt, but you can model how to heal. 15 years ago, a man knocked on fear's door and walked away. 15 years later, he knocked on accountability's door and stayed. And that difference changed everything. Now, let me ask you something, and I want you to sit with this. Is there a door in your life you've been afraid to knock on? A conversation you've delayed? An apology you've rehearsed but never delivered? Because time doesn't stop moving. Children grow, parents age, opportunities close quietly, and silence, if left unchecked, becomes permanent. Daniel learned that regret can either paralyze you or push you towards courage. Camille learned that silence, when rooted in strength rather than bitterness, can build something unshakable. And Isaiah learned that a man is not defined by who leaves him, but who he chooses to become anyway. The knock didn't erase the past, but it rewrote the future. And sometimes, that's enough. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. If this story touched your heart, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories about resilience, dignity, and quiet justice. Because some lessons don't come with applause. They come with peace.